Welcome to the Realty Trader Talk Podcast, where business meets mindset through purpose, testimonials, and redemption. It's brought to you by RealtyTrader.com. I'm here at my first guest, Justin Baksh. And starting out with, where were you? Did you grow up in Florida?
No, so actually I was born in Trinidad.
Okay.
Came to the United States in mid-'80s, which was a much different time. So we ended up in New York because my father's brother was living up there. Took us about a year to realize we weren't built for cold weather. Came down to Florida and been here ever since, pretty much.
So that leads me into growing up in Florida. And did any of you growing up think that it was going to lead you into, your business of where you are today?
Absolutely not.
No, not at all.
Interesting thing, because one of the first things I did as an adult was I joined the military. I was a United States Marine. And when transitioning out of the military, they make you do a career inventory test, so kind of what are your interests, what would you be good at? And actually social services was one of the lowest scoring things.
Mm-hmm.
But just, I've always been told, you're a good listener. And then just by chance, I ended up going to school and becoming a therapist. And here we are a couple of years later.
Right, here we are. So let me say Justin is the CEO of iMind, which is probably the largest mental health multiple units or facilities in the Treasure Coast. Is that a true statement?
I would say we're probably up there, if not number one,
within
size and volume.
Top three for sure.
Yes.
Right, and that's all the way from Martin, St. Lucie, and Indy River. Is that correct? Okay. So, of course, growing up, never thought that was going to lead you into that. Now, you also have kind of a background in the addiction space, correct?
Yes. About 12 years exclusively working in PHP, IOP levels of care. Had experience, at the detox level as well in residential, but pretty much the whole gamut of addiction treatment. Yes.
Right. So, and that is kind of how I personally know you.
Yes.
I'm here today at this podcast as a big reason through my journey because of you. And let me tell that story. So when I got out of jail, I was in the process of fighting for custody, and my attorney at the time, I believe, knew another therapist who reached out and then contacted you and said, "Hey, I've got a client who needs help. Is this something you can work with?" Is that kind of?
Yeah, she asked me to do her a favor.
A favor.
For her attorney, however the attorneys knew each other.
Best
she's like,
favor
"Hey,
ever happened.
do you mind seeing this individual for me?" And I said, sure.
Okay, so then, right, and I ended up, so I came to you, and I remember when I sat down with you, and it was kind of at that same breaking point of hit my knees when I got out. Tiffany took me to a meeting that first night when I got out, and I just was like on my knees, "Lord, help me. I need, I will do anything to try to rebuild this life." And I felt that way when I met you, and I said, whatever he asks me, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to lie. I'll tell him all the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I truly want this help. And, I remember that, and I remember at that time, the way I remember it is that you were like, "Okay, well, I'm going to put you with Beth. She's amazing." And, I didn't know any difference at the time. Like, okay. And then at the moment you're like, "You know what? I think I'll see you and I'll, talk with you. Let me set an appointment with you." And at the time I didn't realize, your level or your expertise. And, I think that was a gift from God, to be honest. Because, I wouldn't be here today without that journey with you. But is that kind of what you remember, or you tell me from your mindset?
For the original reasons why you came out, I was willing to kind of, sign off, because when it comes to addiction and recovery, there's no 100% certainty that this person will never use again, right? But you gave me enough in that moment to meet the requirements of what you needed, for regaining custody of your kid, the reunification therapy, that in that moment, you had it together.
Yes.
And in that moment, I was in a place where I was not seeing people anymore because I was focused on building the business and, growing and scaling. And, it worked out, because being a part of your journey is ultimately what gives me the therapist high, if you will. I've
absolutely.
seen a lot of individuals grow and change over the years, but Through many life struggles you've had over the last few years, you continue to be resilient. You continue to be committed to you, your family, your wife, and it's cool to be a part of that journey.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's means a lot coming from you. And when it comes to addiction, through therapy, what do you see the benefits between the rooms, AA, therapy? Where do you decipher the two from?
I think it's a must include. And there's not one. People say there's not one cookie cutter way to tackle it or to stay sober. But I find with the collaboration of everything, because you have to have the immersement with that social support system. Mm-hmm. The lack of a social support system is ultimately what creates the addiction. So therefore, immersing yourself in a social support system, mm-hmm. that really makes a difference. The therapy kind of works on the specifics, The social supports, the rooms, works on that community support and reminder that if you don't stay grounded, it's easy, right? Because again, I'm speaking to the choir here, but how many times you heard 10, 15, 20, 30 years sober, mm-hmm. they fall off, and for what reasons? Mm-hmm. Doesn't necessarily, and the truth of it, you don't need to be immersed going daily to meetings, but you do need those counseling reminders to remain grounded because again, as I've told you, some of the greatest liabilities that you've had active in addiction are some of your greatest assets as you are sober. Mm-hmm. It's just what's wielding the source of that asset or liability.
Where's the drive behind it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is attributes that you pick up through addiction, in business specifically, or even life or drive, or, if you, can go out and you chase this drug so hard every day and you're trying to get this and it's just driven for not the right reasons. And if you can, you get sober, you find God, get a sponsor, get in the rooms, find a great therapist, all those pieces, but you harness that and utilize that for, those gifts into purpose for your kids, purpose for your family, purpose for business, and try to, grow. I definitely think there is a correlation there. I know a lot of addicts who have gone through addiction who have, grown and surpassed and done amazing things. The owner of this specific studio, is one of them, a friend of mine, and, he's done amazing things out of addiction. So I definitely think there is a big correlation there. But iMind is not just for addiction. I see when I go in there and sit, I do all of the Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River, do they all service the same products or do they do different things?
99%.
Yeah.
The only one that's different is the TMS, which is a deep depression treatment, an alternative to medications. Mm-hmm. That's only based out of our Port St. Lucie office, but all the locations have, therapy, psychiatric med management, testing options, Spravato, esketamine treatments, trauma support, EMDR therapists at all locations. We have, I do believe, 44 providers currently spread out at 3 locations. So mm-hmm. there's a fit for everyone or anyone out there.
Yes. Well, I think as things change and we're in 2026 and where the mental health and the acceptance of it and everything of where it is today to where, in the 60s or 50s where it was just such a bad stigma, where do you see it growing from here at 2026, the acceptance where it is now? There's so many people, celebrities talk about, it saved my life. So where do you see it going?
I think that there's always, unfortunately, going to be a need, because this is a multi-layered issue or reason why it continues to persist. You've got the true chronic serious mental health, right? So individuals with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or something a little bit, again, more intense or more chronic. Most often when people come in, it's about stress, anxiety. And I'm not talking diagnosis labeling people, right? It doesn't mean that you carry that diagnosis the rest of your life. It's that life has become too much and they're reacting to a problem versus being proactive in not letting that problem exist, right? Mm-hmm. Or being, again, ahead of whatever issue it is that they may be facing. Things like technology, AI. One of the things that AI is doing currently, it's feeding into instant gratification. I actually am an adjunct at IRSC, mm-hmm. and I have the private practice clients still. So I've been teaching at IRSC for probably about 4.5 years now. And one of the things that concerns me is that how much AI is being used. And it's a double-edged sword because I use it. as well too. But you're taking critical thinking, analysis, questioning. You're accepting in certain cases, and to some extent, there's a reason why you had to research. There's a reason why you had to be patient and wait. Because human beings, instant gratification is the absolute crux of what creates an addiction. Instant gratification, or the lack thereof, is what fuels a lot of the issues that we see coming in. So on one hand, you've got this great technology, you've got great access, but at the same time, human beings are losing resilience. They're losing the ability to, the internal fortitude to push through difficult times. And it's not just talking trash about the younger generation, but the lack of resilience. My daughter's in college currently, and we have conversations about her roommates and just different things that are happening, and it's really, we've handicapped younger generations, and then therefore, you walk around, you're seeing kids on iPads. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Mom and dad get that 5, 10, 15 minutes of peace and quiet, but when they're fixated here, you've got less sensory building and development happening. You've got, this kind of tunnel vision view or perspective, right? And you start looking at morals, beliefs, value systems, and as I said, it's a very much multi-layered problem.
Yes.
So I agree that there's less stigma today, but still very much misunderstood what mental health treatment is really about. It's not about a diagnosis. It's about being proactive.
And I do roofing and real estate, and they say AI. They're like, oh, well, AI can help you, but I'd like to see them go nail a shingle in, or AI can help you with the process of getting a home, but I'd like to see them show you the home and explain the damages. In the therapy sector, and this is just in my experience, is something I've learned, with you, is, all of it is based on emotion. And, we talked about this the other day. I was for Easter painting a wall, and it was an issue with, Tiffany's getting mad. I had to do it the day before Easter, and I'm tearing out a whole wall, and it comes down to, it's not about the wall, it's about the anxiety of her getting it done. It's anxiety about me finishing it and achieving the goal. And can AI, because I hear people talking about AI therapists and where it's going, can AI decipher, emotion like sitting down with somebody? Where does that fall?
So I attended a conference about a year and a half ago, and one of the presenters was a professor at USF. And they've got a whole department just researching AI, and he's a clinician. So interesting statistics that, they had started running some studies, and 62% of people can't tell the difference between AI and a human therapist. Now, this is my profession, so of course I start getting concerned, right? And there's that belief where AI can give you answers. I think it's a mixed bag. If we look at just our current population today, we've got individuals that are heavy into technology, Alexa, Google Gemini, and ChatGPT, and Claude, and all these other things, right? They're heavily bought in, invested, okay with that. So the theory is that section, and this is just me, I have no other data really to, to say this, because it's still developing today, as, most AI products are, or platforms. Are those people that are more bought into, right? Like I call it the Apple crowd. Is an iPhone really truly better than an Android? And there's the pros and cons. You can go back and forth. But since they've bought into the Apple concept, is Apple AI going to be more trustworthy, reliable, right? If we had to guesstimate, maybe 35, 45% of the population will be okay with an AI therapist. But one of the things that makes me think that this is where AI will always be lacking is because, emotional stuff is not tangible. Thoughts are not tangible. Yes, you can teach it to think, and even AI self-learning, But what I'm getting at is that COVID taught us that we can do pretty much anything remote.
That was my next thing, right?
But iMind, since I've started this from day one, I have had more people demand in-person sessions. Like I have tried ad campaigns. We piloted what's the term in marketing?
Targeting.
Yeah, in Jacksonville and like Lake Placid. Geofencing, yeah. You know what I mean? And no success at all.
Oh, you've tried to have me do it, and I maybe twice.
A couple times you had to.
You had to, and I'm like, that's not happening. Yeah. Right, there's something special that happens in the room when you're a breakthrough or perception of thought. You can hear something, but when you're sitting with somebody, there's been so many. The biggest thing that I've really learned through this process is that my thought process is actually more wrong than right. And same when it's in my control, I give it to God. No, when it's in my control, I end up in jail and in addiction and all these things. So when it's, me, and I've, think this is the right way. And I've sat with you and, seen different perspective, and I just hit me with this aha moment, like, wow, I was completely missed the mark on that. And if you would have asked me before you presented it to me, you couldn't have told me different. So I think you will never be able to get that experience or that understanding through AI or through this process. I mean, there is something, that goes on between one-on-one with two people and the growth of that.
Well, to add to that, I
Yes.
hope, because it is my profession, that we're correct here. But the only thing I can see is that that AI, unless they did some type of, and maybe this is something we can develop here, right? Going into the AI space, because again, it's a push pull.
Yes.
You can't completely exclude it, but you can't completely embrace it. You got to reach middle ground somewhere.
Correct.
Is that with other than facial recognition software, AI understanding and reading a person's facial expressions, which I also believe involves body language as well too, because there's the congruence or the incongruence. Oftentimes people think I'm pissed off and I'm not presenting as pissed off, but you're coming across. So this has happened, in a couple sessions
Yes,
where
100%.
your wife may have said one thing, but body language
Was
clearly
screaming
didn't.
something different. Right.
And the other fault of human beings is that we like to put our perspective of that. So if I'm
Right.
typing in or talking to the AI therapist, is the AI therapist going to pick up, well, that's BS because I see you saying it, but I don't believe that that's really what's happening, because that's what's happening in my mind, right? I'm looking for inconsistencies. I'm looking for incongruence. I'm looking for those things to say either you're on track or you're not. And if you're not on track, let's explore it. So,
Right. And I'd like to add in my personal opinion, this is, the way I think, because I think there has been just what you said. I agree completely. There's assets to both. And I think as it grows, there's going to be aspects to use both of them. And if you just go completely against it, you'll fail. Same, in my industry and specifically in real estate more than some of the others, just where that's coming with contract writing and finding and scrolling the sites, and the big guys, Zillow and Realtor and Homes and all of them already have all these big systems in place for that. So, you've got to adapt with it. And today, who knows where in 20, 30, 40 years, that person, needs you to take them out. They need you to show you the home. They need to show up. They need to see and explain and feel comfortable. People do business with people who they trust and like and feel confident that they're going to get the job done. And, I don't know if that, the AI has that yet. But,
well, and I think we've talked about this before too. Anytime I've ever made a big purchase in life, whether it be the home, right? We had a connection with our realtor. It wasn't a connection with, an online submit your application. I've never purchased anything major in my life without being connected to and again, if salespeople are good.
Well, right. But you have to feel that. You have to feel like this is a home specifically is one of the largest purchases you'll ever make in your life. So if you don't have that confidence, like, okay, this is the right move I'm making, because it is a big move.
I trusted that she had our best interest in mind. Because whether I'm a therapist or not, there was a couple freak out moments like, I don't want to do this. And
right. Whoa,
what's going
right.
on? And why is the bank asking? What, she had to, it's okay, and talk you through that process. I think that's, when you're talking mental health therapy considered, even in the realty world, it's that, realtors are like financial therapists. They are like, therapists to a certain extent.
It is 100% a therapy piece to it of talking off the ledge and reassuring and getting them through perspective, 100%. With that being said, do you think therapy for someone like myself in real estate or sales, because therapy is based, on working on yourself, understanding yourself, do you think there's a piece that, using therapy will help you in business?
100%, because now you're asking me more of an existential question. Is the dollars that you're producing in the real estate world, right? Because some of these deals are huge, right? I'm not in the space, but just hearing some numbers of, what you could potentially make on whatever deal that you're working on. Is the dollars enough? Is the dollars creating the connection with the people in your life that you care about the most? Because you can give them money, you can buy the material things, but is that sufficient for a deep connection and enjoyment, fulfillment in life?
Absolutely not. And I was a successful real estate agent up to about 2017, 18, and then it slowly was a decline. But my sole goal was to sell a home, get a commission. That was I did not have a goal of helping. It was through my ability of selling your property or finding you a property, you're going to benefit from it. And that was what my thought process was, and I'm going to get this check. After falling as far as I did, reconnecting with God, spending this time that I've learned through you and therapy, really has come from a helping mindset. It feels better and gives me more purpose in life, and it goes into my kids and my wife and everything, is when I can help and truly come from a help mindset. And, just as an example, I have this amazing client. I love her to death, Dorothy. I know she's going to watch this. I sold her home, and she's in an assisted living, and I picked her up and took her to the bank afterwards to help her set up her account, and I'm going to pick her up and take her again. But just being able to spend time with her and know that I'm helping her and know that I'm being able to be a good person and be that person. There was a time when, they wouldn't let me even walk in that facility door, let alone to now, taking her, helping her with a very large lump sum of money, transferring it, setting up her accounts, to be that person. The fulfillment that you get is, I can't even put into words compared to what, a dollar does. It's just amazing. And God's blessed me more than I ever, have. I'm here doing a podcast with you. I've got multiple deals going. I've investment properties, all these different things in life. And, I didn't have any of that when I was chasing the dollar. So, that's 100%.
One of the things, and I think I've shared this with you before, my mother, before she retired, was a hospice nurse for over 25 years. And we share stories often, again, talking about death in my home is a very common thing.
I bet, right, yeah.
No, but what the takeaway from those stories, whether it had been an hours-old infant to somebody well into their hundreds, and every mix of nationality, rate, you name it in between, right? Unexpected car accidents to terminal illnesses and things. There's one common thing that I heard in her stories. When a person is not fulfilled, reaching their full potential, right? And again, I'm not saying don't make money. I'm not saying don't go out there and do what you do. You do you. But she has seen the dying process extended because of the emotional, unsettling events in life. She's seen people pass. That person that they haven't talked to for years will show up and say, Mom, Dad, cousin, whoever it is, I'm sorry. Thank you. And within a day or so, the pain, and this months-long process that we're going through is resolved, right? So when you take so many examples like that, this is what I mean by, is the money enough? Is the trophies, the awards, the recognition, the ego, is all that stuff really sustaining you through life? Because there will come a point in time. You may not share it with someone else. And we've heard multiple stories. I know a ton of wealthy people, picture perfect looking on the outside, right? Beautiful home, family, access to resources, trips, you name it, right? But then when you get the real dirt, they're not happy within the marriage. The kids are resentful. The kids are using drugs. And it's not every case. It's not every family out there like that. But there's too many universal truths that I've personally experienced working one-on-one people, hearing stories, being in the SUD space, the mental health space, through my mom, friends, colleagues, whoever it is. There's truth to, are you truly happy with what you're doing? And I want to say happy, content. Because I think it's a false concept to be happy on a daily basis, But it's one of those things. It's for a person to be truthful with themselves, what really matters. So if you're talking about, specifically for people in, the realtor space, I think absolutely it can't hurt.
No, not at all. I've never thought about this before, but, because I'm always curious in any industry and business, and, I love to just talk. The whole industry, that whole, iMind business is based on, let me help you. And do people reach out? Have you had someone who's like, hey, I just was diagnosed with this illness. I'm in deep depression. Have you had experienced that?
You never know. This is it's not even an inner joke, but it's just an inner knowing that we have. If you're in outpatient mental health like we are, you don't know what's walking through the door.
Right.
We have screening questions. We've had people show up active in psychosis, postpartum depression. We take people that have been coming off of Baker Acts. We have individuals, and most people think that, schizophrenics are the most dangerous type of, mental health issue out there. That's not the case. Because bipolar comes with mania, and mania is very, very wild. So you name it, it's the DSM, which has, all the diagnoses. We don't know what's walking through the door. But the thing that I love about our team is that, I force us to be seasoned and experienced and to push the threshold, not of legalities, but if we can't service it in-house, we've built a strong referral network of people that probably can help.
If there's someone with schizophrenia, for example, walking down the street, people get super nervous. Like, is this guy going to hurt me, or is he violent, or is that just a stigma? Is that a real concern you need to have, or?
That's Hollywood.
Hollywood. Okay.
The Jim Carrey movie, Me, Myself, and Irene, I think, where he had the multiple personalities. There's slivers of truth in everything, but 99% of individuals that are on the schizophrenic spectrum, whether it be schizoaffective, schizophrenia, are I wouldn't say most of them are there's high functioning ones that are able to, maintain employment and have a pretty normal life, if you will. There are those that, do need case management services or need to be med compliant the remainder of their lives. And it's actually pretty sad, I remember the first interaction with a schizophrenic individual. It's like, I refer to it, I think, as a schizophrenic stare. It's like he was staring through my soul. And I was like, and again, I don't even think I was in my master's program this time. I just started my bachelor's program. I was a case manager at a treatment center, actually. I was like, what's this guy going to do? But that's my stuff in my head, not knowing.
Okay. Having the education.
Right. So if there's any type of stigma, you're 100% right. Those are the big ones, right? Because there are, can be a small violent percentage of any type of mental health disorder, whether it be self-inflicted with depression, committing suicide, bipolar individuals being in mania and doing something wild like jumping out of a car, or, KJ, who you'll meet soon, will tell me stories because she's diagnosed bipolar textbook. And she openly talks about it because she's been working on it. She's in recovery for, I think, 25, 27 years now. And she's like, you know what? I was sitting on the airplane because we were flying up to Pennsylvania because we worked together to go to a facility that we were working at. And she's like, I want to open the emergency exit door while we're in the air. I'm like, KJ, don't do it.
Right, don't do it.
It's too bad for all of us. She's like, right. But those thoughts scare people. If you say that to the average person, right? But knowing her, she was just talking through. She has the thoughts. She's like, I'm driving down 95. I was like, what if I just open the door? You think I'll roll around like a couple times?
She's working through her process.
Nature of what she experiences. So it's just different examples. But I've learned that, there's nothing scary about mental health. True, serious, chronic, diagnoses, it's just very much misunderstood in most cases.
I could see that. I'm going to be honest in the same sense of I would get concerned, and I have a story where I felt like someone was staring, into my soul, and he's treated on medications, and, we ended up, having great conversations, and, he was, ended up being a really great guy. It just, in that initial thought process, I definitely threw some judgment and was like, what is going on here? But so with KJ, and another, great thing, separate entity, something that I'm, very excited about being able to get involved with, is there's a nonprofit. What deductibles or fine or what is that?
So iMind for profit is definitely, again, this is an internal joke. It's like we're Walmart access but Target quality, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
Because we're not high-end concierge. We have a ton of quality services, obviously licensed individuals. I'm very proud of the team that we have, the efficacy of what we can do, and the reach that we have. But, we're in network. So even though we are like the cheapest option, if you will, there's still those individuals that are uninsured. They can't get Medicaid for some reason, or they're indigent, right? They're homeless. There's many different reasons, and we've talked to the Sebastian Police Department, areas out in Okeechobee. We know even here in Stewart, in Port St. Lucie, there's individuals that need care that can't afford it. Even current day and times, you got to have 2 incomes in a household really to make it. A $20
today,
copay
right?
Weekly can be unreachable for people, right? So the whole purpose of the iMind Foundation is that we want to bridge the gap for mental health care. Eventually, once this thing is fully rolling, what it is you can apply, and we're going to set up referral partners within the community that are, either going to do the sessions at cost.
Okay.
Because that's what I've set it up to do at iMind, and then, is whatever it costs me to provide that services, that's what we'll pay for.
And that's going to be affiliates with iMind.
Correct.
Okay.
And then also, so everything from copay assistance, hey, I got prescribed this medication, but it's, again, $30 copay. So the hope is to bridge some time that the individual can engage in those services, get stabilized, because at the end of the day, it's similar to recovery. If you don't put recovery first, nothing else is going to come to fruition. Right. If you don't manage your mental health and you're at that point where you need to reach out for services, employment's going to suffer, relationships are going to suffer, finances, everything is going to suffer until you take care of that core issue. So we're hoping to bridge the gap again for those within the community that can't even afford a $5, $10, $15, $20 copay.
So with the iMind Foundation, is there a Facebook, Instagram? Is there some way to reach out if somebody wants to get involved or to learn about it?
So we've got the website, the imindfoundation.org, and the Facebook page. We'll be doing a pickleball tournament May 9th, I believe, at Whispering Pines Park. We're hoping to have, about 150 participants. We've sponsored that event in the past just for bridging the gap. May's Mental Health Awareness Month. So we'd cook burgers and stuff, for the players and stuff like that. And
that's a good time.
some instruction, we've done our mental health awareness fair a couple of years ago now. We kind of just do community events to get known.
Speaking of AI, I'm going to have to ask one of the AI guys how to what's the skills for pickleball? What's the technique to hitting the ball from the left or the right, or get a technique for it? Yeah, but I'm excited to be involved. In my experience, iMind and the therapy and through the process, really has got me to this place here. Again, I like to say with God and everything else, but it's like you mentioned with addiction, there's meetings, there's a piece, there's all these different pieces to make the whole, pie come together. It's not, I don't think it's just one thing or the other. And again, you identify with different things. Some people might not identify with the rooms or with certain different things as much as they do with other areas. So, whatever works for you, go with it. And, that's probably one of the most important pieces. But to be involved with someone that's going to help, and because you're right, there are people even who come in and get government assistance who can't afford to pay for any of it, and to be able to help that is a huge piece. The next piece of it is that, okay, so where is iMind going from right now? I mentioned you have one in Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River. Indian River is the newest one, correct?
Yes.
Right. So then are you planning on going north? Are you planning on going south? What is iMind's plan?
Definitely going north and probably central. These are just tentative right now, but, somewhere between Kissimmee, Orlando area. What I've found is that, our model works really well for a fast-growing area or population. And we used to live in Kissimmee at one point in time, and Point Siena is not what it is today. I mean, Orlando in itself.
Right.
But it's just about, again, access to care, because one of the things I firmly believe in is that we do it, and we do it better than most. Again, there's some great private practice out there. There are great agencies out there, and we refer to some of them because, again, whatever reason internally we can't, so I don't consider us competitors. I think that we're reaching people. And again, that's one of the things. Since July of 2024, we have grown 164%.
From 2024. Right.
For the month of April alone here, we have scheduled close to 5,400 services just for April.
That's amazing. That's
within
a true,
2.5 years.
That's a real gift.
So And it's a thank you, and it's one of the things that, again, this is why I said I'm amazed by how much of a need there was. So it's not that, the rural populations, because we do have plans, for offices there, but the goal is just to continue expanding to be able to help people.
100%.
It's unbelievable need.
Well, and I've spoke with people, and I've personally done other therapy that never lasted, and I've told you multiple times that this doesn't get to end. I don't care how big you get, but most therapists, we maybe see 2 or 3 or 4. And, when I walk into iMind, just as far as the St. Lucie West office, there's got to be 30, 40, I don't know. There's a lot of different therapists throughout the different times of the day, I guess. But, compared to the accessibility there for people who do need help, if you do need a service, you have the people there, skilled people who can, help and accommodate, which is great. And I know as well as for children all the way up. So is the iMind Foundation, because it's all under one umbrella, that's going to be, you'll end up probably doing pickleballs or tournaments, or you foresee it growing into doing it in Indian River, Martin, and growing.
Ultimately, what I'd like to do, and don't know if you've told or would like to tell, Jordan has been asked to be on the board. I'm a founder of the iMind Foundation, but I'm not sitting on the board. So Jordan, with his,
I'm excited.
I think the results he's experienced and awareness now of mental health and how it impacts people, has been invited, and I think is accepted to come onto the board.
100%.
But you'll help kind of shape activities and whatnot. But right now, it's a pass through. But eventually, I would love to, within a year's time frame, turn it into something that is actually operational.
Okay.
Get the rural healthcare certification, to get the grants from the government, because, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there was a lot of money coming towards rural healthcare, which is good. That's the underserved populations tremendously, right? And that's when it will become operational, its own entity kind of operating on its own. But right now, it's just an idea that's active, but we just need to do more work to get it where it needs to be.
Well, yes, I have some ideas that I'd love to, execute and put into play. It definitely, again, kind of like saying before with Dorothy, seeing what it's done for my life, I think being able to present and help, anyone else who has any interest or want to learn about it. I have really close couple who I presented and told them about iMind and to go and reach out and what it's done for my wedding, Tiffany. My wedding as well, getting us through that process. But what it does for our relationship and kind of the tools that we've used to navigate. Because I don't care what every marriage has arguments or disagreements, and to be able to have the tools in place, just like through addiction, the biggest thing I've learned is tools, and it transfers the same thing into my marriage, which it's been a super asset for both of us. I actually sat down and had a very meaningful conversation with her yesterday through a lot of the things that I've learned from you and Jenny. Shout out to Jenny. Jenny, also my wife, attends iMind and sees Jenny, and she is amazing. She's at the Indian River office. So I think this is going to come to the conclusion today for this podcast with Mr. Justin from iMind. You guys reach out. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, hit the like button. I'd like to get these out there, and I'm trying to get my first 1,000 subs. So I appreciate it, and y'all have a great day. Justin, anything you'd like to add?
No, to close this out, Jordan, thank you for the invite. It was a pleasure being your first guest. And one of the things I will say for individuals that are going to be viewing this, and not just because I know Jordan, but it's just with true, genuine, and authenticity, which is one of my favorite things to tell Jordan. He walks the walk. He just doesn't talk it, A lot of people, they put on that false mask, right? And Jordan has been able to, because I've personally been a part of his journey a little over a couple of years now, which is a short time, but it's a long time considering the amount of things that you have gone through. you walk the walk, you just don't talk it. So
No, I really
there's a
appreciate
lot of
that. Thank
value
you.
to topics and discussions that may be discussed on here that I would say definitely subscribe.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.